We're
Hello.
live.
We are.
That was supposed to be 30-second countdown. Looked like it was 21. I don't know how that works. Math and stuff.
So glad to be here and happy to have you back, Dali, this
Thank you.
week. 2 weeks in a row, hopefully many more.
I hope so. I hope so.
So why are we here?
Oh, so why are we here? Sorry, I am here to shut down the feedback on that playback. So, okay. Hi, we're here talking about street epistemology, doing street epistemology, demonstrating it, exploring it, critiquing it. And all those things in this 2-hour window between the practices on the Discord. So that's why we are doing it at what is for me 1 o'clock Pacific time, and for Diamond is 4 p.m.
Or,
Eastern.
yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Coast to coast.
yeah. Diamond is in the future, about 3 hours to me. I
Hmm.
I am I have a problem with our friend Michael from Australia, and that is he is in the future and still has refused to send me um,
Lotto
the
ticket
lottery
numbers?
numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's
That's the
that's a
first thing I would
problem.
ask for anyone in
Exactly.
the
It
future.
would
Yeah.
solve a few local problems if suddenly I knew. Anyway, but he says I misunderstand something. Oh no.
So people are free to call in. We encourage people to click the link in the chat. There should be something pinned. I'll just make sure it's up there. And that'll bring you backstage to the StreamYard account, and you can come
Hmm.
on in with whatever claims you're interested in talking about.
Hmm.
So is there any areas of claims that you recommend? Because a lot of times I worry about seeding claims when I do SE.
Yeah.
And so street epistemology is all about exploring other people's ideas.
Hmm.
What advice do you give when you're trying to get people to think of topics without necessarily seeding them?
I have been using the something you think is true, something you believe is true, and think is true and believe is true get two different responses apparently. So I probably want to lean into think, because the response of believe seems to trigger up political and theological opinions, which is fine. If somebody wants to explore
Right.
those are probably the most productive, but they're also the most intimidating.
Hmm.
So I really look forward to when a person goes into politics or theology on the second or third conversation. If the first one is about bike lanes, great. You know,
Yeah.
oh, easier.
So you find
Uh,
a bike lanes discussion easier than
no, I think they do.
oh, okay. Oh,
I
I
think
see.
it's an intimidation of the interlocutor that I'm concerned about. Myself, I've done this enough that it's just okay. The next thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people if you say what's true about the world, I wonder if they think that it has to be like big external like truths, universal truths, as opposed to, like you say, the bike lane around the corner. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I- I'm trying to bring in people for the first viewer or not the first questionee of the first interview uh, that are experts and they're very familiar with the evidence that makes their case, because I think there's a contrast there. I think most of the
hmm,
time when we get SE, we get things that are poorly evidenced, uh, and and I want people to see how that goes. A lot
right.
of times people will be pretty good at street epistemology and then fall down when it comes to examining a claim they agree with.
Hmm.
And so I want that to be part of the experience.
Is that so you think it's a little more challenging to SE claims that you agree with?
Generally, that's what I hear reported. Um, Maybe it's not so much for myself because I'm starting with the falsification criteria of my own claims right up front. It's like what information would lead me to reduce my confidence, and if I can't identify that, then I haven't understood the problem yet. I don't have reason for confidence yet. Then I think.
Ca- Can you elaborate for people who aren't familiar with the falsification idea? Can you
Hmm,
clarify that some more?
sure. Let me see if I can come up with an example. Um, Sorry, my head is swimming with possible claims, and none of them seem to be exactly correct. Okay. I saw a Veritasium where he said carbonated beverage at rest, full, untapped, and carbonated beverage dropped and freshly shaken have the same pressure.
Mm.
It's surprising, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he goes off to explain it, and so I'll just say look for
Sure.
Veritasium, something about CO2 pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the kind of information that would convince people turned out to be like uh, pressure sensors stuck to the bottle. Okay, demonstrate, demonstrate. Now that you can talk about the underlying stuff, but the actual pressure needle
Right.
and the demonstration that the pressure meter was working, mostly enough. Most of the people go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I get it. And what intuitively seems correct becomes shifted very quickly.
Mm.
Yeah. So, what would falsify the idea that when you drop a carbonated beverage, it suddenly increases in pressure?
Right.
Direct testing.
So when you say that you go into conversations where if you agree with the claim, you already have an idea of what would falsify it for you. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, yeah. I have as a step in my coming to believe a thing, being able to identify for myself. It's just a checklist. I'm about to believe a thing. Do I understand what would change my mind?
Hmm.
It's just a sanity check for I'm about believing thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now I am sounding almost like uh I'm sounding almost like how do I say? Just got distracted. I'll come back to it.
Good. Well, I'll just bring up Gina's question. That might have been what
Hmm.
distracted you.
Yes,
But yeah, so she had a
that's actually what I
they
was
had,
going to say. I'm almost
okay,
sounding
cool.
like I can choose my beliefs, and I don't think I can. I think I can choose what should convince me. I can choose reasons to believe, and I can mostly choose away from reasons to believe that I think have become unreliable. And if anything, I might be pushing too far into skepticism.
Hmm.
It's right now I find it harder to come to believe a thing than to come to disbelieve a thing.
Do you think those should be kind of equal? Is that why you think you're leaning too far into skepticism because you feel like it should be just as easy to come to believe as something as not?
That's something I'm weighing. That's something I'm working on. In my personal life, there are several things where if I could just choose to believe them, it would be more convenient.
Hmm.
And I find myself blocked from coming to a belief um, about like what a particular medicine does or how it works, something like that. I'm having a difficult time coming to a belief until I can have data that satisfies my epistemology. And so the restrictions I've put upon my own personal epistemology are perhaps getting in my way, and perhaps in the long run they're serving me. It's hard to say.
Gotcha. Um, I
Most people just believe their doctor, but I've become picky.
so while we're waiting for callers to join us, uh, and anyone feel free to drop in if you want to even just chat and ask a question in person. But I'm thinking it would be useful to just outline what street epistemology is for anyone who's just stumbling onto the show or maybe listening on the podcast. And I'm sure many of you have heard this dozens of times, so we'll try to keep it brief. But when you're out on the street, so to speak, a lot of times there are people like you and myself and several other YouTube content creators that will go out and literally be out on the street interviewing people. What is your
Hmm.
go-to spiel for how you tell people what you're doing and thereby what we are hoping to do on this channel?
Mm. Is that a general question or is that a specific one
Yeah,
for me?
one for
It's a general
you
question. Cool.
specifically.
Oh,
No, I
specifically.
mean,
Okay.
yeah. What typically do you
Hi,
when you're
we're
giving
doing
your
interviews
yeah?
today.
Uh-huh.
Uh, we have free water and free speech. Usually we're giving away water in a walking space, and it can be any topic that you like. And it's about maybe 10 or 15 minutes.
Hmm.
There's a bit
And
of an
that's
about pun in there.
oh, I totally missed it.
It could be about anything you like, and it's about 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh, gotcha. That took me a while. Okay, I like it. How have I never
Yeah,
picked that up in
mostly
two
people don't stumble on that one, but
2 years I've been
sometimes you
listening
get a
to you and
laugh.
I never picked that up.
I don't know if I'm even being consistent. It's not something I have a, a practice pattern for. I think about one thing and then I sometimes just copy myself.
So do you expand on what you're trying to do in the conversation in terms of like man, maybe I spend too long on this when I'm doing my interviews, but I feel like I need to explain
Hmm.
how the conversation is supposed to go. I mean, I like the word interviews a lot because it does kind
Hmm.
of frame their mind that you're going to be asked questions.
Yeah.
Um, but
It's a
yeah,
very slanted.
right,
There's a significant power dynamic in the person who's asking almost all the questions and is giving away almost nothing.
right.
So we're asking them to consent to this weird slant.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can describe it as a conversation too, but you still have to somehow clarify that why it feels
Hmm.
unusual. It doesn't feel like a normal dialogue.
Yeah.
But
And to be clear, I'm perfectly willing to allow the tables to be turned. If they want to be the one asking questions, great, ready for it.
right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is really unusual in terms of compared to our normal conversations, everybody does tend to try and make a point and people aren't always listening to each other. This was one of the things that attracted me to it is how much emphasis there is on listening
Hmm.
and not arguing back. Um, and I come from a family. I'm the youngest of a few kids, and
Mm.
my older brothers were always, strong arguers, big debaters in our family.
Hmm.
Um, and and so I started telling one of my brothers about this, and he's gone down the rabbit hole and started watching some videos, and then he was trying to explain it to his spouse, and he's like, it's kind of the opposite of what I do. That was his
Hmm.
explanation. It's complete opposite, and he says he didn't do a great job of explaining it, but we're working towards it. So it's
Hmm.
nice to
Hmm.
see it spread, even among my own family, which is cool.
I would like to try something when somebody wants to. Now, the person who I would try this with needs to understand SE well enough not to get really confused by this. I would like somebody to pick a claim and keep it to themselves,
Hmm.
and then pick their evidence and keep it to themselves and let me ask 20 questions,
Mm,
uh, not literally 20, uh, about their evidence and see if we can do street epistemology completely on the far side of the claim.
right.
Then there's an interesting thing is if I have accepted the category of their evidence, am I likely to believe their claim?
Mm,
if I get category of evidence first and then evidence and then claim. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is, can you do SE without even knowing the claim?
Yeah,
That would
and
be
I've seen,
interesting.
let's see, was it on Sound Epistemology? I can't remember if it was that channel. Somebody can clarify in the chat. The
Mhm.
hidden claims SE has been, there's a
Mm,
few video examples of this.
I will look that up.
It sounds like you might be going one step further. So in the examples that I saw videos of, it
Mhm.
was just the hidden claim side of things. And so he did try and clarify that he doesn't want to know the topic, so they had to dance around a little bit on what, how to ask, how to respond to questions. I mean, obviously
Mhm.
the SE practitioner, not knowing the claim, they can ask pretty vague questions, but it feels like it puts a lot of burden on the interlocutor,
Mhm.
to the interview partner, to keep the secret, right? Because they know it. So that can be something, like you say, if it's a more experienced SE person,
Yeah.
then they don't mind that burden so much.
Yeah.
So
SE is weird enough for the uninitiated.
right.
Yeah.
So we have Mark in the background here. I'm going to
Yay.
go ahead and bring Mark into the stream to say hello, and maybe he has a question or a claim. How's it going, Mark?
Good, how are you?
Good day, Mark. We are well.
Yep. Oops. Let me get there we go. How are you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Good.
We are well.
Thanks for dropping in. Did you have a topic that you wanted to discuss today?
Well, I was listening to the, I'm quite familiar with SD, so I was listening to the exercise he wanted to try, and
Mhm.
I'll be willing to do it.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
excellent. Excellent. So, Diamond, usually we do this one-on-one, but I doubt Mark will be intimidated so we can do this together if you like.
You know what? That sounds fun, because then I can also, each of us can make our own determination at the end as to whether we believe the claim, right? And then we can see, did Mark convince both of us, or
Mhm.
only one of us, and why? I love it. This is exciting. Experimental SE. Let's do it.
So, Mark, you have a claim in mind?
Yes.
Good. So roughly about the claim, is this a scientific claim?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have specific evidence in mind that led you to believe this claim?
Yes.
Okay. Is this evidence the kind that if I were properly equipped, I would be able to observe
Yeah.
the results? Yes. Okay. Is the scientific evidence that the remotely observable evidence most or all of what compelled you to believe that the claim is true?
Yes.
Okay. Is the does the evidence come from peer-reviewed science?
Yes.
And I guess
Okay.
Mark should feel free to ask clarifying questions too.
Sure.
I think,
Throw in anything you like.
if you need anything defined or whatever.
I'm good. You continue.
Okay.
Cool.
Is this something that you thought was not the case earlier?
Yes.
Aha. Okay. How long ago did you change your mind?
3 years.
Nice. Nice. A fresh one. Fantastic. Does the evidence that you have come from multiple independent sources?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I now would like to jump to the end and learn what evidence it is.
And I will add to that is equally an n equal of 1 as well. So I am part of my claim.
You are personally part of your claim.
Yes.
I don't know.
So, yeah, the multiple independent sources is interesting. So, I don't know if it's
Across
too
multiple hard
Mhm.
sciences.
across multiple hard sciences. Gotcha. And I'm trying to think of how to ask about any opposition. Like, I don't know, Dolly, can you think of a question to ask
Yeah,
in
sure.
this form?
In prior to those 3 years, Miles, now come on. Pr Prior to those 3 years, were you moderately well informed on the topic?
No.
Okay. So when you learned about the thing, was it essentially the first evidence you'd seen on the topic?
Yes.
Okay. In the meantime, has there been any evidence that would be neutral or go against?
Evidence in. Could you define like evidence?
Sure. I'm going to go with Tom Jump's say future testable predictions, where they said, all right, if we observe this thing
The no.
based on our model, it will look like X. So in every case, when they have observed the thing, it has confirmed the hypothesis.
No.
No,
There's
in some cases it's been insignificant.
Of, evidence. There's plenty of items that masquerade as evidence that people use as evidence but aren't actually evidence.
Okay.
Because it's not what we observe. It's not scientific.
Interesting. Okay.
I have another question.
So, yes, go ahead.
Do you know what would shift your position on this?
Yes, a randomized, controlled, well-tenured, well-controlled study showing the adverse to my hypothesis.
Cool.
Okay. Fantastic. You have in mind what would be good countering evidence, and you would be moved by any evidence that was methodologically sound and appropriately vetted, and that kind of thing. Okay. Thank you. I would love to hear what the evidence actually is.
Let's just take some quick questions before we get evidence from the audience. So James asked, what's the meaning of evidence in this context?
Oh, to me.
Yeah, I defined mine and you can define yours.
So evidence is something that is observable through experimental means, something that is repeatable, just about the same line of where you described evidence as.
And one more, Robert asks, how has this claim affected your life?
100% in the other direction, positively.
Oh, okay. So all of the effect is positive. Is that what you mean?
Oh, yes.
Does it affect you on like a daily basis?
Yes.
Wow, this is exciting.
Macro and micro.
Cool.
Wow.
And James says, I missed the topic. And no, you didn't, James.
We all did.
We all missed the topic. Yes, this is a hidden claim exercise.
So far, Mark has been very careful not to tell us what the nature of the claim is. And we're exploring what the nature of the evidence is and before we know the claim.
Okay, we have a guess that this involves a medical condition. Do you want to confirm or deny?
Sort of. It may or may not, for some people, have a medical utility. But it is everyday thing. You do it every day. And it is unavoidable for human life.
I think I'm convinced that the claim is true, even though I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I'm strongly inclined that as long as when you describe the evidence, it doesn't hit any red
that it
flags,
matches.
I am predetermined to
One more
believe you.
thing, Dali. What is your confidence that this claim is true, Dali?
Leaning.
So, like, okay, would you put that at more than 50%? I didn't ask your scale. What scale do you normally?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's 1 sigma toward, which is about 2/3 over 1/3. And this is all contingent upon the evidence satisfying my criteria when it comes out there. So I'm looking forward to that. Are there any further questions before we spill the beans?
There is. If the claim was not true, how would the world be different for you? And maybe this can be the last question, because this might give it away anyway.
If the claim wasn't true, I would have catastrophic health failure.
Is the claim dietary?
Yes.
Okay.
And we only learned it's true 3 years ago. I am baffled.
Mark learned it's true.
Mark learned it 3 years ago. Yes. Okay, I think we're ready, Mark.
So I believe my claim is that humans are obligate hypercarnivores. We do not need plants or carbohydrates to survive and thrive and be healthy individuals.
Okay.
That spans through, the evidence spans through anthropology to modern day physiology and mechanisms of the human body. And
I'm confused what obligate hypercarnivores means.
So any time, like, human beings, when we evolved to chase animals off of their kill. So we wouldn't necessarily make the kill. We would chase a lion off of a dead antelope. So that would be an obligate. Just like an obligate omnivore would just eat anything they could find, like a raccoon.
Is it opportunistic? Is that
sure
similar? I don't know. Okay. I think I've heard that term too, but okay. Gotcha. And hypercarnivore, what does that mean?
Meaning we eat other carnivores as well.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Like fish, lions.
Yep. Yep. Dogs and cats in some places.
Yeah.
Is that meat only diet?
Yeah.
Is that?
And my N=1 is I've only eaten beef for 3 years.
You've eaten only beef for 3 years?
Only beef.
Oh my goodness. Milk and cheese?
Nope.
No milk and cheese. Okay. No eggs?
No. Eggs and cheese. Okay. I've tried them as a experiment, like in a day or two, and it doesn't sit well, or have reaction to them. Because it started as an elimination diet, so then I took after the first year of just eating straight beef, I wanted to see if I can incorporate others. When you take it down to the bare minimum, you can tell the slight deviations. Like, okay, that doesn't work for me.
Okay, like Peter asked.
Without problem, but I just don't like the taste of pork too much.
I understand. Do I believe his claim? My prior on this claim is that humans can be fully healthy in a meat dominant or meat only environment. My prior data was general, and then specifically from Travis Statham. He's one of the people around in this community, and he's very prominent, I think, in a Reddit community about carnivore diet, maybe. So I leaned in that direction, probably probably 2 sigma that people can be thriving healthy in it. And I think you're confirming. So maybe you've moved me up a smidge. I'd like to hear more about the actual data, which might move me more.
But and
The actual case.
I'd just like
Go
to
ahead.
clarify the claim one more time, Mark, if you could. Do you think you could
The claim
repeat
is
it?
that humans could survive and thrive on an all meat diet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the obligate hyper carnivore, I think that's dictionaries at 20 paces.
Right. Yeah.
Which is to
So
say
I
we
think,
could fight about the definitions, but what very little to come from it.
so for me, the only part of that like is the thriving on a meat only diet. I think that prior to this conversation, if you were to ask me that, that would be my hang up. I'd say, can you really thrive? Like, is it really going to be healthy? I would have lower confidence than when we started this conversation, for sure. And this is I'm actually vegetarian, so this is great for me to hear. And it doesn't sound like the claim is, it's not a claim that you can't thrive being vegetarian either. It's not like, or maybe you would go that far.
I mean, you can thrive as being a vegetarian because you still eat eggs, fish, and cheese, right?
Yes.
So you're getting.
Actually, I don't eat fish.
Well, you
just
get
eggs and cheese. Sure.
Eggs, you can thrive on eggs. Eggs have all the nutrients to make a baby chicken.
Do you think it means that you couldn't thrive as a vegan?
No.
So you're not making that claim.
It does not mean that?
Yeah.
I don't believe you could.
Oh, so you
okay, so you think it's less likely that you can thrive as a pure vegan?
Only because I know some vegans. I don't know every vegan, but there's studies showing that 80% of vegans quit within the first 5 years, and then 90% of those people that quit claim catastrophic health failure.
Oh, okay. So
you could be
some direct experiential evidence against.
And the way that the food industry is going now, where you can get pea isolate proteins and case proteins from certain things, sure, and you can get B12 shots, but is that a diet that you're taking a handful of supplements, or is that a regimen, a medical regimen?
So if you have to supplement it, you're claiming that diet is incomplete if it needs to be supplemented to provide thriving.
Yeah, it's not a diet, it's an ideology at that point.
Could the other be as much an ideology?
In what sense?
Could somebody be taking the meat position idealistically? Could somebody be choosing that because
if they
potentially bad reasons?
If they are ignoring their health problems. So sure, if they suffered from like a deficiency and they refuse to acknowledge the fact that it's their diet that is causing it, sure, that's an ideology at that point. Like,
okay,
just because you eat chicken nuggets doesn't mean you're going to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
They could be suffering orthorexia, and that's ideology at that point, because you can't see the forest through the trees.
Orthorexia? I don't know that word.
It's when you believe that your diet is helping you when it's not, or you believe all your ailments and everything could be changed by your diet, like depression.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's perhaps far too much reliance upon one factor, one input. Right. I see. for several years, I have been on a primarily meat diet. 80 or more % of my calories come from meat and cheese and eggs, and that kind of thing. And then I'm careful to put in a salad every day because I have been thinking that it's good for me to get those things that come with the greens. I think you're saying that that's not true, that I don't need that salad for balance.
You don't, and people so anti-nutrients is an actual thing. If you like, for example, spinach comes with protease inhibitors and certain enzymes that actually disrupt the enteric function of your digestion. Because plants don't want to be plants can't run away. Right.
Yeah. So some of my favorite plants are the ones that have developed interesting defenses.
Right. I mean, we learned that
arugula, I think it is. I like arugula very much.
I don't think I'd eat a plant that was running away personally.
Like we learned that in like elementary school that like animals and plants are in a arms race for enzymes. Animals develop the enzyme to deal with the enzyme that the plant's putting out so they don't get sick. You know, there's phytates in beans and legumes that if you eat a raw kidney bean, it will kill you. You know?
Really? Never tried it, obviously.
There was a bunch of literature that came out in like the 60s where like children were eating raw kidney beans and getting sick and dying. So much to the FDA was like, you can't really like if you look on a bag of kidney beans, there's a warning label that says must boil and discard water. Because like people were dying eating kidney beans. Yeah.
For those who want to look up the research themselves, what can you give us some breadcrumbs to go down that path? What do you recommend?
Okay. So if you want to learn like the anthropology part of it, you look up stable isotope testing of carbon and nitrogen in the long bones, the cartilage from the long bones of early hominids. They just put out a recent study out of Israel that reevaluated it. It's a pretty interesting read.
What does the stableness of isotopes in the cartilage indicate?
So they can basically tell from early, like by isolating how much nitrogen is in your cartilage, they can tell like your diet, whether you're on in a strata for herbivores, omnivores, carnivores, and then above if you're like a killer whale would be above that because a killer whale eats seals. Seals are carnivores. So they would have far more nitrogen than a seal would. So that's basically.
I see. Okay.
And they've done it back in the 70s, but it wasn't. They didn't also do carbon and other isotopes to stratify the region that animal was in, or that creature or the human was in, to say, well, the bark of an elk might score high because there's a lot of nitrogen in bark and there's a lot of nitrogen in lichens. So that would put them higher than a lion, but that lion and that elk don't live in the same biome. So that way we are able to stratify it to be like, oh, okay, so this is what we see in this biome, where a bear has higher because a bear is eating the elk. So therefore that bear is in that biome and that lion is in this biome. Yeah. Where
I see a question from Quinn. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on you. I see a question from Quinn. If a cannibal diet was the healthiest, would you eat others?
To survive? I wouldn't be the first.
Okay. I'm going to take a hack at that one and say, no, prion diseases.
Only if you eat the brain.
Good point. If you can avoid eating any of the nerve tissue, you might be okay.
If we could extend it a little further, what if it wasn't exclusively to survive? What if, we maybe can develop
like Soylent Green?
Yeah. Maybe as people get older, maybe we just,
I'm good.
good with
chickens
that.
and chickens and cows, they're serving their purpose right now.
I don't have any problem with Soylent Green. That's not eating people. That's eating something that ate people.
No, I'm talking about the movie Soylent Green. You don't remember that movie?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It was a yeast product that ate people. So they made a food product. Anyway, I think of Soylent Green as an organism that ate people and became food. But maybe I'm not understanding that.
You're right.
We have a bunch of questions in the audience for this. So, has there been a group of people that lived on meat-only diet? How is their health? Did you know?
Traditional Inuit?
Okay. Yeah.
They lived in the Arctic Circle. I don't think any vegetables are growing up there. There's the Maasai warriors of Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
They live on blood and milk and beef.
And their health is presumably good.
They have better health than their neighbors that eat standard diets.
Mm.
But they have their own problems. So they drink a lot of milk, and so they like the elderly people complain of osteoarthritis,
Mm-hmm.
and constipation. There's casomorphine in milk that suppresses your function, your what is that called? Periodic function of your intestines, where you move it, the muscle moves the poop down.
Mm-hmm.
If you drink a lot of
peristalsis, yeah,
that's the one.
It's just casomorphine suspends that. So everybody knows, doctors know, if you prescribe a pain medicine, you have to prescribe a laxative. They go hand in hand. If you don't, you got constipation. Osteoarthritis, well, milk has, what's that? It's an enzyme that works kind of like gluten does, and it binds to your gap junctions in your bones. So,
and
cartilage.
Can you clarify, when you say thrive, how do you know you're thriving?
You feel good. You don't feel sick.
Okay. Gotcha. Do you know if that has any impact on the life expectancy? There was a question about your expected lifespan, or the group's expected, the Inuit expected lifespan. Anything on that?
I mean, from my understanding, even hunter-gatherer, Ice Age cavemen, if you could live past 18, most of them live to 80. Because when you see mass graves, they were young and very old.
Hmm.
So the skeletal remains. I mean, and it tracks too, because if you were young at 35 and you died by getting trampled by a woolly mammoth, they're not dragging your body back to bury you. They left you there. They left you out.
Loss in war and hunting accidents is not buried. That makes sense.
And for the Maasai of Kenya, they you can YouTube. There's a bunch of videos where people go and have conversations and talk to them and stuff. And there's a lot of them that, the older gentlemen that do trading, they go out and they trade with other villages, or they go to market. Those tend to have a shorter lifespan and more health problems, because they're going out and eating the sweets and the different stuff that they don't normally eat. And you're talking about they said that 80 was a short lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's all like anecdotal at that point. I mean, there will never be any study done because it's unethical to lock somebody in a ward for their whole life and feed them just meat or just carbohydrates to see what's the best substrate of energy, you know? And then it would have to be two identical twins, or else
And then you'd have to have a big enough N for it to matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to do it a lot before I would, I'd need a big N.
And the thing is people don't realize a lot of the RDAs and a lot of these medical, like that you need this and that, were done to prisoners in Japan. And they were very cruelly done. Like, we know that the body boils at a temperature because somebody was boiled at that temperature, you know?
So, Mark, have you searched for research that counteracts that claim, conflicts with the claim?
Oh, all the time.
All the time.
I always try to find something that contradicts my hypothesis, because it's only a hypothesis. To me, it's not a proven fact.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it will never be a fact, because, like, for ethical reasons. I mean, I'm an N equals 1, and that's all I can hope for.
How do you go about searching for research that would falsify this?
So, by looking everywhere, even plant-based news, listening to vegans, vegetarians, plant-based doctors, dietitians, just looking and listening for a new argument, because their old arguments are debunked, or I've already looked at and like, okay, that's not. Like the diet hypothesis, cholesterol is a marker for heart disease. No, sorry, it's old. You know, we moved past that. But I keep my ear to the ground for new research that comes out. You know, stuff that I can point to now that's done in mice might come out in humans. They might do a random control trial in a human, and it might show something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always looking.
Nice.
If I were to look at a cohort, a big population, and let them self-select, let them self-report as to what their diets are, and then follow them long term, do you think I could learn something that could move your confidence up or down?
That correlation couldn't inform on a causation, though.
Okay. Right.
Self-reporting would be like, what do you like the nurses study, right? The big nurses study where it looked
the
at
one that came down on potatoes really hard. Is that the one?
Sure, but the thing is a lot of these unhealthy nurses, they know what to write down. They know, like, oh, but it came down on potatoes hard. But when you look at the literature, it seems that eating more than 4 cups of fruits and vegetables actually hurts your health, because these nurses were saying, I eat 4 to 5 cups of fruits and vegetables, when they don't. They drink Monster and they eat hot dogs from the gas station on their way to work, because it's health user bias, you know?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see that bias.
You know, like people that smoke cigarettes and drive motorcycles and use Roundup without gloves on, or sand their walls without respirators, more likely to eat meat. And people that go to the gym and go do yoga and go for walks, they're more likely to be vegetarians, and because of mainstream biasy telling you that plants are healthy. So the people that do the healthier thing tend to have a healthier lifestyle, right? Because they, like, for blue zones. So they talk about blue zones in Loma Linda, and they live the longest. What they leave out is literally 50 miles away, the Amish. They don't eat they eat meat. They eat a balanced diet, but they also don't smoke. They have fellowship. They don't drink alcohol, just like the Seventh-day Adventists, they do the same thing, but their diet is completely different. And they
so
live
Gina was asking, what are the best arguments against a meat-only diet?
The best arguments against a meat-only diet is morality. And
okay.
it has nothing to do with health, because there's really no good argument for health on an all-meat diet. It's whether or not somebody is morally justified in subjugating an animal for their own nutrition.
Okay.
That's an argument that I can really stand on with my, it's not feasible to be like, oh, because I need to live, so my life doesn't trump a cow's life on a moral stance. I have no leg to stand on that one.
Yeah. So where do you stand personally on that question? I'm going to have a trolley problem. There's a person and there's a cow. Do you switch the trolley to avoid killing the person?
100%. The person comes before the cow.
Now 1,000 cows.
Huh?
1,000 cows, still the same answer?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. 1,000 cows to save one.
Okay. Hopefully that's a sufficient answer.
So how about this one, right? This is one that messes with me more, right? So what about like your dog? Your dog or a human in a river drowning. You could save one. Who do you save? The human or the dog?
I would fight myself really hard to save the human.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would not be ambivalent about it. That would be a hard choice. Stranger or my pet.
Let me add a different one. What if the dog had a pouch on its neck, and around in that pouch was a cure for cancer? Would you still save the human?
The dog.
That's an easy choice. Yeah.
Yeah, the cure for cancer versus one person. Oh, it's so much easier for me to save my dog now.
I would still save the human, because no technology should outweigh the breath of a human life. Because where does it?
But now we're talking about a trolley problem of one human against a million.
Right.
And I have to kill one human against a million. I mean, the math, I can't work the math any other way.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going for the cure for cancer. I'll save that. And if the dog gets saved, that's fine. And if the dog drowns, but I still get the cancer, I still win.
I would still save the human.
Okay. And I can respect that. Yeah, I can respect that. Do you have any of these studies that you're making reference to available? Or could you give us Google search terms?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best ones that I think for cholesterol would be to look up the Minnesota Burns coronary heart. All right, let me see if I get the full title right.
And if anybody in the chat is willing to Google this up and throw a link, please, by all means. I'm betting that we are not very limited in people posting links. And if we are, we'll fix that.
Yeah. Because to me, that's one of the last truly randomized, truly controlled studies, because it was a medical ward lock-in with psychiatric patients, and they could only eat what they were fed, and they couldn't leave.
Okay.
And they switched into 2 cohorts.
Okay, so, and those 2 cohorts were given 2 different diets that varied in cholesterol, and then
one was saturated fat, and the other was polyunsaturated fat.
Okay.
And they followed up for 5 years.
Okay. So 2 different kitchens, bunches of people who were involuntary and hopefully weren't being mistreated within boundaries.
Oh, they were. Oh, they were. Oh, yeah. It was.
Well, okay, they weren't being mistreated by being fed this food. They were being mistreated in other ways.
Technically, by the standard of like the outcome, I would say they were being mistreated.
Okay.
Because
so what was the outcome? Was the outcome that
the amount of cancer and death that was coming out within the first 2 years to 3 years?
Okay.
They wouldn't have had to keep pushing up to the 5 years.
Okay, so in which case was there greater cancer and death?
Polyunsaturated.
So polyunsaturated was bad compared to saturated
fat. Yeah.
Okay, saturated fat I'm thinking of as margarine and animal butter, and butter from cows, butter from milk, the fat off a steak. Those are all saturated fats.
Yes,
because they stay wax-like at something close to room temperature. That's one way to test it.
They don't have any double bonds in their fatty acid chain.
So I'm going to suggest we go ahead and let you go, Mark. And we have another, I think, supporter in the background that we'll bring on. And Mark, if you want to chime in on the chat and if you want to come back on later, that's totally fine too. But thank you so much for kicking this off and doing our experimental claim. That was fun.
You're most certainly welcome.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Travis on.
Travis! Haven't talked to you in a year.
Yeah, hey. Yeah, I was
Hey, there you are.
Recently.
You look just as healthy as last time.
Oh, thanks, I guess.
No, I mean, that's a good thing.
Travis, did you want to repeat the same claim? Because we could go ahead and do an SE session on
so I was
something
just
along
on
those lines.
Modern day debate, and then I checked YouTube and I saw that claim on there, and I'm like, what the heck? Someone else is making this claim? Like, this is like my claim. Like,
okay. Would you modify it at all? Like how? So
I actually didn't really hear most of it. I just got here
it was
in the last,
humans.
like, 4 minutes.
I'll restate the way that Mark had said it. He
Humans
said
are facultative carnivores.
Humans can survive and thrive as obligate hypercarnivores.
I probably wrote that. Jeez.
Okay, well, let me just I'll put that up there again, and I mean, we can't do the blind claim anymore, but maybe we could SE this one again for like 10 or 15 minutes or something real quick. Would that be
sure.
Okay?
I mean, like, so I'm an SE also with, I do SE also. I'm an atheist. I'm actually a moderator of the Street Epistemology subreddit. So I end up posting a lot of these links like this one to it.
And Pine Creek.
And Pine Creek, yeah, I'm a Pine Creek mod. I got infinite Pine points, so I became a mod. Yeah, so you see all these books here. I've been researching the carnivore diet for like the last 5 years. And I was instrumental in setting up the carnivore survey study, which if you look up behavioral characteristics of carnivores and then like 2029, it's like all part of the title. It will show this survey that we did to basically collect like a scientific definition of what the diet is. And then also see basically cheaply whether people experience health benefits. And like on average, like 70% of the people got like great benefits through most of our criteria we checked for. And we had 2,029 people for an average of 14 months. Now, some problems with the study is we required people to be on the diet for 6 months. So if anyone kind of did it for 3 or 4 months and then quit, we didn't allow them to enter it. So you could say that like anyone who tried it and didn't like it in those first 6 months, like wouldn't be counted, and then it's all like subjective after that. But we didn't want to get like people who just started and then didn't really have like a significant change from their baseline in order to really say what changed, you know, like
So
there isn't
were you concerned about a selection bias? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, selection bias, exactly.
So then how did you
saying,
factor that in?
I'm saying like we can't factor it in. Like,
okay, gotcha.
Like I'm just saying like that's
a weakness.
You know,
yeah,
that's a weakness, exactly. So I want to do like more carnivore studies myself. I actually just moved to Utah to become a master's student, and I'm gonna hopefully study the carnivore diet myself. Kind of build off on this first survey study that we did. So other fun facts, I was on Good Morning America for the carnivore diet. You can Google that. I also have a website called nutrition.com. And it was called Carniway before this, but I changed it recently to Nutrition. And basically, I asked the question, it would make sense if explorers and ethnographers and anthropologists all went and lived with like Arctic peoples and had to adapt to the diets that they were eating, right? Mm-hmm. So in actuality, there's quite a few books of people going up and living with the Inuit and basically engaging in all meat diets and, you know, having extreme skepticism at first and then becoming, you know, adapted and liking it. And, you know, there's certain guidelines they give in their books, and it's usually like you need a certain fat to protein ratio. So you have enough energy and you don't like get stuck in this phase called rabbit starvation, where you could eat tons and tons of protein, but if it's too lean and there's not enough fat in it, you can't really digest it and you get diarrhea. You get sick after like a few days even.
Okay. What is that limit? If I'm counting should I be counting by calories or by mass? Or how should I look
by calories. Like, let's see. Like 1-to-1 is kind of like the low end, but really like you could have up to a 4-to-1 fat to protein ratio by calories.
4 calories of fat for every calorie of protein?
Yes.
Okay, so more fat than protein by calories.
It comes out to about an equal weight of the two because fat is more energy dense.
In very rough numbers, I want to say protein is 4 calories a gram and fat is 9 calories a gram. So a little more than 2-to-1.
4. Yeah.
Yeah, carbs are also 4.
2.25
within a round number.
Yeah. So generally, like you end up in this state called nutritional ketosis. And there's all this science out there. I also run a subreddit and I collect science basically on this specific diet, which is called the ketogenic diet. All that requires is less than 50 to 20 grams a day of carbohydrates. So there's like a ton of research on this diet and it's like exploding in popularity in terms of research. But
so my daily salad is keeping me out of that, right?
No, actually, like a salad is probably going to be green veggies and oil, and there won't be really many carbs in it. Now, if you're having pasta or bread or like a beer, that will get you out of ketosis. And like I have like this whole shelf here is like all on books on ketosis, you know. I went to Low Carb Denver, which is this gathering where like just doctors in public can go to it. And, you know, there's like presentations that are all about the ketogenic diet using it for various chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes. It helps type 1s manage their disease and use less insulin. It gets type 2s off of insulin entirely. It basically cures obesity. It is good for gout, even though everyone says red meat is bad for gout. And then there's like there's research into using it for cancer because cancer feeds off of the energy source of glucose. It proliferates in high glucose, low oxygen environments. So there's this effect called the Warburg effect. There's a book here called Ravenous, which talks a lot about it. And that basically discusses like a metabolic angle for understanding cancer. You have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, you have clearly a lot of support for the position. What would you have to see to be convinced lower in your
to go down?
Yeah, to go down.
Yeah, I mean, you also didn't ask me where I started. I would probably say 80 to 90. I really think the historical evidence is really strong, and I think we kind of ignore it all because we say like it's not science. But on the other hand, like our science and nutrition studies are like 6 months long. We like, you know, like we build them on a bunch of assumptions, like people need carbs to function, and then like you can kind of trace how like the myths and the assumptions have kind of ruined a lot of nutrition science over the years. So I really like the historical angle because it gets past all that. It's before that, and people aren't lying about like, you know, their wilderness and adventures, more or less. You know, they really are just eating like the caribou and the fish, and the seals and the polar bears, and it's like, you know, like, yeah, they're eating berries for 1 month of the year and having a little bit of them, but that minute amount of vitamin C isn't like necessarily like stocking them up for the whole year. There is vitamin C in meat. There is like actually.
Oh, I think we lost connection there.
Okay.
I'm going to put him in the background just for a minute.
Okay.
While he gets his connection restarted. Yeah, this totally interesting claim that I have not ever SE'd anyone on, I don't think, before.
Cool.
Yeah. Have you talked to Travis about this before?
Yes, I even interviewed him on my YouTube channel a year and a half ago.
I'll have to go back and listen to that.
There was a friend of mine, Mark, who is has a diet similar to yours. He avoided a few other things like not frying in vegetable oil and a few other things. A lot of quite vegetarian. I'm not sure exactly how vegan, but his claim was that his diet was the healthiest for he and his wife. I think it was limited a little bit in that claim, and his evidence set is similar to Travis's in that it is largely expert opinion and anecdotal and a bunch of those things, where Travis is trying to achieve better methodologies. Seems to be very difficult. I hope I'm trying to explain the difference between yours and Mark Solomon's. Not Mark Solomon. No, not Mark Solomon. If you remember, I interviewed you a while back, and you were responding to Mark, a friend of mine who came on talking about his vegetarian. Yeah, you know him. And it seemed like he and you have a somewhat similar evidence base. You both have the opinions of experts. You both have a lot of anecdotal evidence. So let me ask you, what's your position that that a person with, so let's say somebody knocked meat out of their diet for ethical reasons. Can they thrive? What do they have to do to thrive? Do you find that to be unreasonable, that a vegetarian diet or a non-animal diet can thrive?
Yeah, so another group I'm a part of is called ex-vegans. So although I've never tried veganism, I consider it kind of a like somewhere like a kind of religiously based, like very ethically based like religion of some sort, like less scientific than my side, I think, because like I'm not trying to like save the animals, you know. I'm not trying to save the plants by not eating them. I'm trying to use it on science and evolution, and I'm going back 4 million years, you know, saying like humans were hunting megafauna back then and growing big brains and becoming bipedal and social hunters and all this stuff. And they're saying, well, we kind of came from these mostly vegetarian chimps, and the 8 million years in between don't matter. We can just go back to that lifestyle. And I'm saying, like, no, like we really evolved on high fat animal diets. And our evolution was basically like, that was the gas pedal. The way I put it, like in an environment, right, an animal species has some factors that are driving its evolution. And I really think the thing that's been like pushing, you know, like when people ask why are humans special, I think it's because we finally had access to, like, we are dumb apes in the trees, but we had hands that could grasp, right? So these are amazing things that can finally use tools, and we can combine that with our minds and create weapons. And then we could overpower these giant animals that had tons of fat.
Can confirm that did happen.
Yeah, that all happened, right? But the vegans can't really make that argument. And so there's another part of the story that I haven't talked about, but basically in 1863, there was this vegetarian prophetess that basically started making all these vegetarian arguments. And she was from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Battle Creek, Michigan. And all these kind of Millerite Christian sects started preaching this vegetarian idea. And the vegetarianism and the Christian kind of got mixed up in the 1850s and stuff. So you can read all this. There's like this book called The Vegetarian Crusade. And it's, you know, they're kind of pretty open about it all. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church now is incredibly huge and influential. Kellogg's is basically like Seventh-day Adventists. There's this Loma Linda community in California with lots of Seventh-day Adventists. And basically, they've kind of infiltrated the dietetics community. And I kind of think they add a lot of extra dietitians, dietetic. Yeah, basically they're like almost nurses that kind of are experts on diets and stuff. But like if I go up and talk about the carnivore diet to a dietitian, they would like they can't understand it. You know, it's like they've been so force fed this idea that everyone needs lots of healthy whole grains and fruits and vegetables, and really everything they learn is just you add fruits and vegetables to a diet and all the problems go away. And what I'm saying is it's the sugar, the seed oils, the refined grains, the soda, all this junk food packaged up, and people are just eating gobs and gobs of that. It's becoming, it makes you addicted to it. You binge on it, you overeat it right there, right?
Is that dangerous?
Yeah. I mean,
is my 0-calorie soda bad for me?
Oh, 0 calorie? No, that's good.
Okay.
That's all right then.
Yeah.
You're off the hook.
But
good.
You know, these foods are like easy to overeat. And
it's one of my favorite caffeine delivery mechanisms.
I like coffee. Yeah. I'm all out though.
Yeah, me coffee too. Definitely.
Good. But yeah, generally, so the vegetarian argument, I'm in the trenches basically every day hearing these ex-vegans coming along and saying, I'm feeling really guilty, you know, I'm a true believer, but how do I change my mind basically? And it's almost like it's an amazing spot for street epistemology, because you kind of have like that opportunity to say like, what question is going to get them over the hump and get back to eating meat and doing what I think is a healthier diet. And, you know, like, are there truly healthy vegans that thrive and survive? Like, look, I've heard of 21-year-old people that have never eaten meat or dairy or any animal product in their life. So Like, yes, I know that there are like adults now that can function without all these things.
Yeah.
I'm saying like statistically, it seems like you get lower growth rates, like less protein, you don't have enough B12, you're anemic, and all these problems kind of bubble up until you quit the diet. So also your liver has all these extra stores of like vitamin B12, and that can last for like 3 to 5 years if you had a lot of it before. So
yeah,
it makes everything confusing because some people like feel really bad after a month without meat, and other people can last 4 to 5 years and be like, you know, it's all good and dandy. But when people leave, they often say like, I was really kind of telling myself lies. I was like lying to myself. And I feel all the same religious like ideas when I hear of like religious people like leaving their religion. So I don't think you can thrive really, but it's like the
I'm hearing you
ethical
say
thing gets added in, and then it seems like it is.
Yeah, let me see if I can give this back to you. When people leave veganism, it's usually a question of a series of health deficits that when they introduce meat back into their diet, those health deficits usually reverse. Is that the claim?
Yeah. I mean, it's, in a lot of ways, it can make sense, right? Like they're kind of going back to cooking whole plant foods and kind of paying attention to what they're putting in their body. They're cutting out a lot of junk food because, you know, like, yeah, I'm saying sugar, refined grains, and seed oils, which are like soybean oil and stuff, that those are the unhealthy things. But a lot of foods, you know, add in milk and dairy into those, and then those are cut out because they're no longer vegetarian or vegan. So there could be like this proxy effect, right, where like they cut out junk food and then they're like saying, wow, it's actually because I cut out meat that I feel so good. But really, like you just cut out like the bad plant foods that were causing you all these problems, right?
We have one other person in the background who had a question for you. Dorf wanted to ask a question, and I had a follow-up question too, but I'll add Dorf to the stream just so he can ask.
Go ahead. Hey, Dorf.
Question.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
Ooh, I like your microphone.
Thank you. So I've been pretty interested in this carnivore diet and kind of moving more towards it in my own life, but people in a circle that I kind of recently locally got involved with have been doing this new combination, calling it's mud slop, but it's a combination of like almost pemmican with mushrooms. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've made pemmican myself. So what pemmican is it's like a 50-50 combination of dried protein to rendered fat, usually made from bison in the 1850s.
Exactly.
They fought wars over it because it was so valuable.
Exactly. So basically what they're doing is with mud slop, you'll take pemmican before you like sort of harden it, and you slop it around with I don't know all the cooking terms, so you have to forgive me on that part.
All right,
They basically slop it around with some wet mushrooms, and then they'll kind of like you'll kind of get like a wet bit, I don't know how to call it, like a wetness in your hand, and you can eat that. And they say that this is giving you energy. This is giving you sort of the same thing that coffee would give you as well. I don't know if you've heard of mud water.
No, I really have never heard of this, which is surprising because I try and keep a tab on all sorts of the community. But
I would take a look at mud slop. I would take a look at squish, anything like that. I think squish is kind of like the overall.
But like,
so these are terms.
This is mostly pemmican. All the fat calories are coming from the pemmican, and what I envision is going on is like you're adding some fresh, like low carb, not plants, but like kind of easy to digest food that might have like vitamin C or some extra like nutrients.
Exactly.
And then like it also freshens up. Pemmican can be really tough to eat. Like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's like you can need to be really hungry for it. And when I've read the stories about like the old like explorers who were forced to use it, right? they would take 90-pound bags of it, and the Native Americans would make it on the plains, and they would butcher all these bison, and they turn each bison down into this 90-pound like thing that they could fit on a horse, and they would just carry that around all winter and eat off of it. And it, like
the calories in a whole bison can be concentrated into 90 pounds.
Yeah, all the fat gets rendered down, and all the protein comes out, and then protein is like 60% water. Wow, my cats are giving you guys a show.
That's okay.
TV.
So Dorf, I might let you go if you got your question in. Did you have anything else?
Oh, the only one other thing I would like to say is like when the only question I had was I kind of want to make mud slop at home, and I was wondering if you had any questions about. So what they're doing is they're taking the pemmican and the wet mushrooms and they're putting it in a bowl, slopping it by hand, and then they're just kind of, because they say it's like more like
they're like eating it fresh.
Paleo, like they're like using their hand and getting in and eating it like with their hands. And I'm wondering if anything, like I would love to, I could use a spoon or something. Is there anything like that? Or like, is it because it's a mental thing for them? Is that actually going to affect
I
me?
would say this is more of a, like spiritual or mental thing.
Do you suggest that I slop by hand or can I slop by spoon? I guess is my only question.
I don't know. It's up to you. I eat lots of meat by hand, so that
there's no like scientific thing that I'm missing out on it, right?
No.
Like I'm sorry if this is a silly question.
Yeah, I think the fork really affected the way our jaws developed, and really affected whether we have wisdom teeth and that kind of thing, because it's
not
so
fork,
easy.
It's what we eat with a fork.
But if you're slopping by hand, then you're never going to have that same evolution. I bet if we're slopping for 200 years, and
I don't know what slopping means.
Like eating by hand, slopping in your mouth.
Okay, so eating with hand versus utensils.
Right. I think it's called slopping. That's what these guys call it. They're slopping every meal 3 times a day. For real, they really are.
I usually use chopsticks. I don't know if that puts me in a separate category. I know that we can tell like skulls in Europe in, I'm thinking 1200, if I remember the document. I could be completely mess up in this, that we can tell based upon the development of the lower jaw whether or not forks were in use.
Wow.
Because when you tear the corn right off the cob, I don't know if that's the right thing, or you tear the meat right off the bone, or whatever, that the lower jaw, the lower jaw develops differently, and those people don't have wisdom tooth problems.
Wow. So maybe, I
met a person in the current day, from Malawi, who grew up in an environment where forks were not the common thing. They would eat with their hands, slop, whatever that is. And
that's what it's called.
And his jaw was of a completely different shape than I'm used to. And so there was some modern cause and effect that I could see. There's a dentist
that actually looked at that in 1939. Weston A. Price. Oh yeah, Mark knew. I have his book actually, Nutritional and something Degeneration.
Well, that's all I really wanted to say. I guess I am going to stick with slop, and I thank everyone for their input.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll accept your definition for whatever word you want to use.
I mean, as with myself, I'm going to be slopping when I eat.
Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
Good.
Oops.
Sorry, I totally dropped you, Dorf, too early. Thank you for dropping in. I don't
know if that was a serious call, because I've never heard of slopping before. But
that's okay.
I enjoyed it.
I'm gonna swish and lick and drink.
Travis,
he did know about pemmican, so
no, I have no reason to doubt.
I don't think I've ever had pemmican.
It's I mean, like, you could basically make it if you go to the butcher and you ask him for his leftover beef tallow fat that like they cart away, and they throw it away. They actually like sell it or give it away for free to like soap companies. So you can basically get that like if you make friends with your butcher,
So I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up this session. Just in case anyone else wants to make a different claim. I did have one final question, Travis, just because I didn't quite hear in that study that you did, because that sounded like that was a big part of why you.
No,
it wasn't. Okay.
That was, yeah. Like I did that study because like
because
I
you were already
wanted,
convinced.
yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, maybe we
like
didn't.
I basically went from the keto science side where I like supported like the low carb dieting to getting to the carnivore side. So like the science in the ketogenic diet like convinced me that maybe humans are actually, you know, that metabolic path was part of our evolution and not, because otherwise like I can't really explain like how glycolysis, us like burning sugar all day, could have developed in the ancient past before, you know, modern agriculture. So you know, like I could basically imagine that we ate a bunch of starches and tubers and berries and we collected them and stored them all winter long and made them last, you know. But at the end of the day, like you have elephants just sitting there and you're really hungry, right? What are you going to do? You're going to figure out how to kill it.
I guess what I wanted to ask about was there are so many nutritional studies out there and so many seemingly contradictory. How can we know if someone's coming in without any?
Yeah,
they just want to know the truth, right? How can they identify what is
like
an effective study that you should believe?
It's a very challenging question because I know of all the factions, I guess, in the nutrition space. Like there's like Mark was talking about seed oils, right, at the end of his talk, and seed oils are linoleic acid, right? So there's like a whole debate online right now between this anti-seed oil crowd and an anti-saturated fat, anti-cholesterol crowd. But they're based on basically whether this LDL cholesterol hypothesis is true as the causal factor for heart disease. So everyone like is kind of engaged in that argument around that like kind of thing. And then like the anti-seed oil crowd is saying, well, like, you know, back in the day, we had 3% of our diet as linoleic acid, and now it's 20%, and we should expect like a big change because these are unstable fats and they oxidize easily, and there's all these possible diseases they could be part of. But on the other hand, you know, we eat all this extra fructose and all these newly refined white grains, and none of them really existed in our evolution. All that we know is that there's probably pretty fatty megafauna we were hunting and surviving off of. And that would have been mostly saturated fat and cholesterol and monounsaturated fats, very low linoleic acid, no trans fats. You know, fructose might have come from honey or from like wild fruit, but it would be like smaller, like less sweet items and more, you know, like
a lot more rare on the African veldt. Yeah.
And I mean, like I can't deny that like herbivorous animals today, like they understand the whole forest when everything is coming into bloom. Like deer and herds of bison are very clever. They like move around to where the grass is going to be like fresh and green. They select among hundreds of different plants, and they know which ones to eat to complement the rest of their nutrition. And
the animals do?
Yeah. It's incredibly complex. And like, we don't really give them credit for that because we just feed them like grains now.
Yeah, we give them a monoculture that
is,
and, you know, best for the bottom line or something.
Right. And so like part of my research here in university is going to be like understanding how the soil affects the plants, and then the metabolites in the plants get eaten by the cows, and then that goes into their meat. So we're looking at grass-fed and grain-finished meat to see if there's a difference in the metabolites. And we'll probably be able to say, like, this cow ate alfalfa because of this little metabolite that we found in its meat. And we'll even be able to now have people eat that meat and then see it being processed in their own system.
Yep. I'm going to assume that some of our audience don't know what low density lipoprotein is or what the controversy is about it. Could you fill us in?
Yeah, basically there's this transfer network of cholesterol particles that contain fat. And because fat and water don't mix, right? So the body has evolved this way to transfer the fats around in these little vehicles. And the
Soap
original
bubbles.
particle, yeah, basically little soap bubbles. They started out as VLDL in the liver, and they're quite full of fat, and then they get carried around the bloodstream, and they drop off fat in different cells that need it, and then they get smaller and smaller, and they basically become like less dense, high density and low density lipoprotein.
Okay, so it starts off VLDL, and then it becomes
VLDL.
HLDL, and then LDL.
I think it becomes like different
wrong.
stages of LDL, and then it ends in HDL.
Okay, so what's the controversy about it? It seems like some people are saying, here's a thing that affects this number, a measured LDL, whatever that is, and that number should lead us to think that's good or that's bad or what? What?
Yeah, so like in the 70s and 80s, they thought that they had kind of figured out the culprit in heart disease, that being LDL-C. At first, they thought it was total cholesterol, and then they refined their claim and said it was LDL-C. And they basically just said anyone with high LDL-C was going to have a heart attack. And there's kind of like a tricky conspiracy angle to this, because around the same time, statin drugs came out in the market. And now statins are like $1 trillion drug, and everyone is like prescribed them, right? So you can make a very real argument that like the statin industry is based on the idea that high cholesterol is bad, and that lowering it will prevent heart disease or help enough that it's worth taking. And like a fun like statin fact is like you need to put like 100 people on a statin for one person to live like an extra 5 days. Like that's how the statistics work out. But they say like, oh, that's a great result. And
yeah,
I don't really think it is.
The for me, the straw that broke the camel's back was a study with an N approaching 1 million showing no morbidity or mortality advantage to people on Lipitor versus people not.
Yeah.
So if it was zero cost and had zero side effects, maybe that's okay.
Right.
But otherwise, that's malpractice.
It's marketing, really. And I mean, I wish
those
I
are not
wasn't
exclusive
conspiratorial
conditions
about this, but I made a subreddit called "Stop Using Statins" if you're curious, and a lot of like the low carb crowd. So the controversy is because when you go on a ketogenic diet, usually your LDL-C increases. So they're kind of defending the concept that LDL-C isn't actually the cause of heart disease, and it's something else. And the something else is probably something we already talked about, right? Like eating too many refined grains, or too much fructose, or too much sugar, or too much seed oils. They're having some chronic inflammatory stress, and somehow it's causing heart disease, which in itself is an incredibly complicated disease. You're talking about like the arteries, and there's all these little layers of cells in the arteries, and they all have unique roles, and they're all evolving. And then like when you add in like, well, what if we're, facultative hypercarnivores, and we've been eating meat for 8 million years? Like maybe we've actually been designing, handling how to process fat and protein better than like our chimp brethren.
You have another claim from
Yeah.
Chrome.
Yeah, so the cholesterol thing, like, and you'll see vegans will double down on the cholesterol argument, like the LDL cholesterol, because it really.
Let me read it for anybody listening and not seeing. Gorgeous Roddy Chrome says, standard Western allopathic cholesterol doctrine is an assumptive doctrine based on incomplete understanding of human body functions.
It's basically the first thing we learned, and a myth grew around it, and now it can't die. And it's like we've been trying to kill it for a long time. If you want a good view of like a lot of the issues around it, I suggest reading Good Calories, Bad Calories by Gary Taubes, who's actually now a personal friend of mine and follows me on Twitter, which is always a fun thing when like you read a book and then like years later they befriend you. And another really great book is The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz, also an awesome person, and she does lots of great research. They both really go into the history in the 60s, 70s, 80s that founded this whole saturated fat, cholesterol, heart disease angle. And they kind of like find lots of holes and problems in it. But the vegans are going to say like, you know, that's a really good argument because it basically says that meat is dangerous for us. And like, you know, like I can see that bias now. And, you know, they're kind of pretty supportive of seed oils in general. There's some guys that will only go for starch, like the McDougall program. You might have heard of him. And to your point before, right, you asked like, how does someone know about nutrition research? Like, yeah, you got to read books. Like you got to subscribe to Low Carb Down Under on YouTube. That's a great source. They post free 30-minute, hour-long doctors presenting presentations on the ketogenic diet. You know, like if you want like the nuts and bolts, like that's where you can find it. You know, and if you have one of those chronic diseases, I highly suggest trying one of these diets to give it a shot, because Western medicine is not like concerned with your well-being. It's concerned with like patching up the holes and making money out of you until you die. You know, like they're not going to save you. And if you're waiting for a miracle drug, you're just going to die waiting. So, and I'm hoping that, you know, like doing a generally carnivore diet is going to be healthy long-term. I don't see evidence that like these carnivorous societies like the Inuit were having heart disease or cancer or diabetes or any of these other problems. I don't see like evidence that like hunter-gatherers really have them. And I will acknowledge that you can eat plants, but generally I think that they're kind of like not that nutritious. And the reasons to eat them are basically like marketing. You can go back to like 1991 and like the marketing, there was like some cancer society that combined with fruit and vegetable research. And they basically said, if you eat 5 a day of fruits and vegetables, you'll prevent cancer. And it wasn't based on a study. There was no science. It was just kind of like they dreamed it up and they're like, I hope 5 a day was enough. Or I hope like, you know, seven a day is too much, you know, like that's unrealistic to expect people to do. But all right, that's it for me.
Cool. Thank you so much.
But
we really
books,
appreciate
read books. Like I have on my nutrition website, I have a book database with 166 plus books. I have a history database with 900 plus entries, linking back to all my ethnography reading. For instance, like,
do you want to
Arctic Memories?
Said, plug your subreddit one more time if you want.
Oh yeah.
If you want to learn more.
Well, that was for street epistemology, but
gotcha. Well, that one definitely good.
I have like a list of small subreddits at Keto 4, the number 4. Okay. There's like a long list there, and then there's Keto Science, which has tons and tons of posts about the science, and there's Zero Carb, which is for like the carnivore diet in particular.
Gotcha. Awesome.
And I've posted tons of links. You can look me up on Twitter, Travis Statham, or like check out my website, meattrition.com. It's like nutrition, but with meat.
Meattrition. Awesome. Thank you, Travis.
Nice. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we've got a little less than 20 minutes left. Especially if somebody wants to jump in with an alternative viewpoint, that's excellent. In general, I'm trying to do a new thing. Maybe it's not all that new. I want to get experts as our first caller. So, get a hold of us ahead of time. I'm at jugglinglessons@gmail.com. Get a hold of us, and we would set you up as the first caller. And I want to have conversations with people who have well-evidenced claims, as a contrast to what's most common with street epistemology, is that you get the unprepared person on the street, and they think things, and they don't have stuff at their fingertips, and they can't really explore it very far. And when we're talking, I think street epistemology is not about coming to a conclusion on any particular claim. I think it's much more meta. I think it's about coming to a conclusion on what are the categories of evidence that should move us. How should we come to think about these things? Get ourselves well equipped to evaluate truth. And so if you're an expert, hit us up. We'd love to make you our ringer for the week, and have you on as our first guest. And if you want to jump in right now, we have maybe 15 minutes, any topic you like.
And just to sort of review the conversation we just had with Travis, like from a SE perspective, how would you evaluate that conversation? What do you think were the things that went well? What do you think could be improved? That sort of thing, if you want to comment on that.
Since both were on the same topic, and both were referring to the same, or at least a similar body of evidence, I would be more satisfied if the evidence reached my gold standard. Right now, what I'm seeing is good studies that are not great studies. A great study to me does not have any obvious selection bias in it. Last week we talked to Herschel Knapp, who was talking about whether a 30-week or a 10-week was, in a particular educational environment, was more effective. And there were at least two ways in which the methodology may be wiggled. One would be the one Hirsch brought up, the selection bias, that only those students who didn't have something else going on that would allow them to go into a full-time were allowed in the full-time, and only those that were motivated and such. So you're already selecting for the ones who are more likely to succeed. Therefore, that there was a statistically very significant, not just significant, very significant 3 sigma across 9 independent criteria, would lead me to think, wow, this is a strong, powerful result. But the selection bias could swamp that out. It's a little unclear. Now, obviously, with enough replication, and especially if you can manage to get around that selection bias a bit, that would help some. The other one would be the professors, whoever's doing the scoring, is intimately familiar with the student. Would they mark the student higher because they've been seeing them 3 times as much over 10 weeks rather than stretched over 30 weeks? Would the biases of the individuals doing the scoring play into the question? So, like, those are 2 areas where I would love to see, I don't know, is that greater rigor? I don't know. Obviously, more replication would be the thing for me. I'd just do it over and over and see if you can modify the situation, see if you can replicate the same result, and we can have more and more confidence in the result. So in this case, I'm going to say that neither side has knocked down solid evidence. Both sides have evidence that have reasons to doubt, not necessarily reason to toss it out, but it doesn't reach the high standard of really can pin my confidence to the highest numbers.
Do you think that we inspired any reflection in the conversations, or could we have asked different questions to get there?
I think I saw reflection for both Travis and for Mark. I don't think they were moved, nor is that necessarily important. And
I think that for me, at least, it's caused me to reflect on, like, my reasons for vegetarian, and I think that's also a goal in SE is, as the interviewer, that if you reflect, I consider that a great success too. And then, you know, so I think that even if they didn't shift that much, and even if we didn't necessarily get them to, you know, pause and think about, oh, hi, I hadn't thought about that, you know, I still think that's totally fine. If somebody in the conversation is moved to improve their critical thinking.
Yeah.
So
I think both
so
Mark
cool.
and Travis clearly have gone over this.
Yeah.
With good SE kind of thinking.
Well,
many times before these conversations.
And we have Mark in the background, so I'm gonna bring him back on it in case he wanted to add anything more. If maybe Mark, I don't know if you heard our conversation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, what did you think about the conversations, or did you have anything else to add?
I was going to make a new claim and see if you guys wanted to chew on.
Go ahead, speed round. 12 minutes.
Speed round.
This one's probably going to ruffle a few feathers. All right. Calories are not a useful measurement for human energy substrates.
Okay, calories not a useful measurement. Diamond, jump in whenever you like. I don't want to dominate this one.
I'm just going to write down the claim, so you start at least.
Okay. Would you say that there is a different measurement that is more valuable than calories?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay. So if I were to change my calories, so let's just say I logged and measured my food or something like that, and I have the daily calories of X, and then I were to change that up and then down or whatever, what do you suspect would happen if I were to increase or decrease my calories by 20 or 30%?
You would see, depending on what the calories were made of.
Okay.
Like what would
Let's say. Go ahead.
So, for example, you are measuring protein as a calorie, but
yes,
physiologically,
rounding to 4.
Physiologically, we know the body does not use protein for an energy source. Protein is a substrate used to build tissue. If you were to not eat carbohydrates or fat, like the other gentleman had said, you would run into rapid starvation.
Yeah.
Which would dump copious amounts of ammonia into your body, and you would have kidney failure and all kinds of sequelae of bad
nitrogen poisoning.
Yes. So the fact that proteins actually have a calorie number shows one of the main things, like we don't use it for energy, so why does it have a calorie number? The body will never use it as energy, and if it does, it's in a state of disarray. The second most powerful thing for calories that aren't for human consumption is the fact that why don't we just eat charcoal? Charcoal has 50,000 calories per ounce. Can we survive on charcoal?
I do not believe that charcoal has 50,000 calories per ounce. That's not an SE thing. That just shocked me.
Yeah, you can Google it. See, the thing is calories, to measure a calorie, they use a bomb calorimeter, and that is to heat water in a bath. They combust the food source till it separates into carbon dioxide and water, and then they see how much heat is generated, and the heat is the calorie. The body doesn't run on heat. Heat is a metabolic, is a mechanism we use to stave off hypothermia. or
Right.
it is a thermogenic effect of the entropy of protein metabolism.
Yes.
So
or
therefore,
carbohydrate metabolism or fat metabolism. Yes.
but there is no heat generated from fat oxidation or carbohydrate metabolism like protein
Okay.
is.
By the way, I'm going to call myself on messaging when I said 50,000 calories per ounce. Okay. But, and I'll put that aside. So ignore that. See if you can ignore that. Do you think that the calorie numbers that I'm usually hearing are inaccurate? They should be a different number, or that
I'm
the
saying
number
that
is just irrelevant?
I'm saying that a calorie is good for a steam engine, which it was designed to measure the best
Sure.
substrate that you could use to boil water to power a steam engine.
Sure.
I'm saying that the human metabolism doesn't work that way. We
Right.
generate energy through a chemical ATP conversion. So therefore, using a measurement of heat, right? Because if you're saying you eat calories, you ate heat. So therefore, if you were to eat 2,000 units of heat, your body would boil.
If you used it all at once, yes.
Well, I can eat up to 1,300 to 1,800 calories in one meal with a big ribeye, you know?
Sure.
That's not going to boil because like water boils at 100 degrees Celsius.
If we could, I'm wondering if we could treat the human body. You said we're not a steam engine, but what if we did treat the human body as an engine, just, a hypothetical engine where you measure the energy going in and the energy going out and measure the temperature change of the human body? Like, could we control that experiment?
You would have to be able to measure, because there's so many factors when it comes to metabolism, like hormones, that factor in whether or not somebody's glycemic index is going to take care of that slice of bread the way, like, you might be able to do it no problem, where me, I might get an insulin spike to where I get more hormones, more insulin, and therefore would slow down my rate of energy upload into my cells.
Exactly. So let me see if I can quantify this. So I've got a given amount of food that is replicable. And I have a control where I stick that entire food into a bomb calorimeter and I burn it to ash using as much oxygen as is needed for that. And then I have my second where I feed it to me, the volunteer who gets in the bomb calorimeter, and they measure the heat coming off me. And then I have my own digestive ash, and then we burn that in a bomb calorimeter as well. So whatever calories are left in my poo would be accounted for. Would those come to the same number?
I wouldn't. I don't know.
Total heat. Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering if this is a question of efficiency. If we're saying that there's a different efficiency in a steam engine versus a human that operates at the same temperature all the time and generates ATP.
And if
am I more or less efficient than a steam engine?
Well, in order for the ash to be the same, energy would have to be conserved. Mass would have to be conserved.
Yeah.
Which it's not. We're not a closed system. So mass is not conserved.
We can conserve. We can close it for a while inside a bomb calorimeter.
No, I'm talking about your human body.
Right. I'm putting me in the bomb calorimeter in the second one.
Yeah, and it's hypothetical, right?
Right.
Well, and I can actually do it. This is done.
Your body inside. So like your analogy where you eat something and then you are put into the bomb calorimeter and then it is burnt to ash. We don't conserve mass. Your body will metabolize into breath.
Yes.
poop, sweat,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and just fat storage.
Yep.
We don't conserve the mass isn't just right there. Like you wouldn't.
So it
Like,
sounds to me like the problem would be confounded by the fact that I wouldn't necessarily go in with the same fat reserves as I started.
well, it's
And maybe I'm not tracking everything.
well, the thing is like not all right. So for calories, you already know that calories aren't an exact number, right?
Correct. It's a rounding number, and it might vary from day to day at the effectiveness or efficiency of the system. Yeah.
So it could be hit or miss 100 points.
100
Like
out of
100 calories, you mean?
So like
Or-
for fat being 9.
Yeah.
So technically,
so fat couldn't be 900, but maybe it could be 10, or maybe it could be 8.
well, the thing is that fat could be higher for somebody that is fat adapted to where they use fat for energy,
Okay.
to where somebody that
Okay.
is mixing like their carbohydrates and their fat, their fat is literally not being used at all and is being stored as fat on their body.
Fat goes in, doesn't convert, and gets stored.
Right.
That what I hear?
If you eat a bolus of fat and protein, or fat and sugar together, you activate the Randall cycle It means that the cell can only take so much energy from glucose or fat. So the body knows if you're getting too much glucose in the bloodstream is a caustic.
Mm-hmm.
You see people living normal lives with high triglycerides, that is fat in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no hard science showing that high triglycerides causes heart disease.
So,
but there is showing that high blood sugar causes diabetes and neuropathy in the
Yes,
veins.
causes neuropathy. I'm going to say high blood sugar is diabetes by definition. Yeah.
Yeah. So the body will prioritize glucose metabolism over fat metabolism. So if you have a higher glucose to fat ratio, then boom.
So, Mark, we only have like maybe 2 minutes left, so we'll have to keep this short. But coming back to the original claim, and I hope I wrote it okay, calories are not a useful measure for the human substrate. If we were to conduct Dali's experiment of sticking him in the bomb calorimeter and trying to track all of the calories inside of, a candy bar and a meat and like several other things, if we were to do that experiment, and let's say we are even able to maybe identify the shift in fat content of the body, maybe do a resistance test or something like that. So if we are able to track the energy in and out of the system, and it does turn out that we can match the calories, we can identify that yes, this 200 kilocalorie candy bar does give us that amount of energy. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying if hypothetically.
So I think I know where you're going.
Yeah.
Yes, I would be convinced that calories were useful if they could do that.
Result. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
awesome.
I believe science is what we observe, and if I could observe it and they could show me it, then I would agree.
How big is the error bar that you see? Right now, I'm just looking at the numbers 4, 4, and 9 for the 3 different types.
Mm-hmm.
How far do you think they're off? Is it twice and half? Is it 5%?
So just in isolation, probably maybe 2 to 3% off. But the thing is like the body is a chemical reaction. So mixing these macros, mixing all kinds of stuff makes a different outcome.
Okay.
Like protein alone, no calorie. It has no calorie. Unless you're being very sick, and then because even if you just eat protein now and you start eating chicken breasts, it's going to take a while for your body to eat through all your glycogen and then all your stored body fat before it actually starts using that chicken breast as energy.
So it sounds to me like protein is not metabolized until it's the only option left.
Right. And people don't realize that now there's this big push for fiber on a bomb calorimeter. Fiber has a calorie. It burns. It eats water, but the body's not using it for calories.
Yeah, fiber is definitely an interesting example, because I'm understanding that fiber,
we can
by
eat
one form of calculation, is negative calories.
Well, yeah,
it offsets calories in terms of absorption.
That's been the push. But you can eat 2,000 calories of tree bark. Doesn't mean you're going to actually get anything out of it.
Right.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. I think we have to cut it short. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
You've been an excellent interviewee, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, Dali.
Thank you. See you later, Diamond.
Bye.